Chapter 1. We had been in India about 2 years, doing regular routine research work, when I met the master known in these writings as Emil. While walking along a street in the city where we were staying, my attention was attracted to a crowd. I saw the center of interest was one of the street magicians, or fakers, that are so common in that country. As I stood there, I noticed beside me an elderly man who was not of the same caste as those about him. He looked at me and asked if I had been long in India. I replied, "About 2 years." He asked, "Are you English?" I answered, "American." I was surprised and very much interested to find one who spoke English. I asked him what he thought of the performance then going on. He answered, "Oh, it is a common occurrence in India. These fellows are called fakers, magicians, and hypnotists. They are all the name implies. But underneath it all is a deeper spiritual meaning that few discern. And good will come of it someday. It is but the shadow of the thing from which it sprang. It has caused a great deal of comment, and those commenting upon it seem never to have reached the true meaning, for there certainly is a truth underneath it all." Here we parted, and I saw him only occasionally during the next 4 months. Our expedition was confronted by a problem which gave us a great deal of trouble. In the midst of our worries, I again met Emil. Immediately he asked what was bothering me and began talking about our problem. I wondered at this, for I felt that none of our party had mentioned it outside of our little circle. His familiarity with the situation was such that I felt the whole matter was known to him. He explained that he had a certain insight into the affair, and that he would endeavor to help. Within a day or two the matter was cleared up, leaving us without a problem. We wondered at this, but, with other things to occupy our time, soon forgot. As other problems came up, it became a habit with me to talk them over with Emil. It seemed that as soon as I discussed our troubles with him they would cease to exist. My associates had met and talked with Emil, but I had said little to them about him. By this time I had read a number of books on Hindu lore, selected by Emil, and I was fully convinced that he was one of the adepts. My curiosity was keenly aroused, and I was becoming more deeply interested each day. One Sunday afternoon Emil and I were walking in a field when he called my attention to a pigeon circling overhead and casually remarked that the bird was looking for him. He stood perfectly still, and in a few moments the bird alighted upon his outstretched arm. He said the bird has a message from his brother in the north. This proved to be a fellow worker who had not reached the attainment whereby he could communicate directly, so he took this means. We later found that the masters are able to communicate with each other instantly by thought transference, or, as they call it, a force much more subtle than either electricity or wireless. I then began to ask questions, and Emil showed me that he was able to call the birds to him and direct their flight while they were in the air, that the flowers and trees would nod to him, that the wild animals would come to him fearlessly. He parted 2 jackals that were fighting over the body of a smaller animal that they had killed and were feeding upon. When he approached them they stopped fighting and put their heads in his outstretched hands in perfect trust, then resumed their meal in quiet. He even gave me one of the young wild creatures to hold in my hands. He then said to me, "This is not the mortal self, the self you see, that is able to do these things. It is a truer, deeper self. It is what you know as God, God within me, God the omnipotent one working through me, that does these things. Of myself, the mortal self, I can do nothing. It is only when I get rid of the outer entirely and let the actual, the I am, Speak and work and let the great love of God come forth that I can do these things that you have seen. When you let the love of God pour through you to all things, nothing fears you and no harm can befall you. Every day during this time I had lessons with Emil. He would suddenly appear in my room, even if I had taken special care to lock the door before retiring. At first his appearance at will disturbed me, but I soon saw that he took it for granted that I understood. I became accustomed to his ways and left my door open so that he could come and go as he pleased. This confidence seemed to please him. I could not understand all his teachings and I could not accept them fully, nor was I able, with all I saw while in the East, to fully accept at the time. It required years of meditation to bring me the realization of the deep spiritual meaning of these people's lives. Their work is accomplished without ostentation and in perfect childlike simplicity. They know the power of love to protect them and they cultivate it until all nature is in love with them and befriends them. Thousands of the common people are killed annually by serpents and wild animals. Yet these masters have so brought forth the power of love in themselves that serpents and wild animals do not injure them. They live at times in the wildest jungles, and sometimes lay their bodies down before a village to protect it from the ravages of wild animals, and no harm befalls the village or themselves. When occasion requires, they walk on water, go through fire, travel in the invisible, and do many other things that we have been accustomed to look upon as miracles performed only by one supposed in some way to possess supernatural powers. There is a striking resemblance between the life and teaching of Jesus of Nazareth and those of these masters as exemplified in their daily life. It has been thought impossible for man to derive his daily supply directly from the universal, to overcome death and to perform the various so-called miracles that Jesus performed while on earth. The masters prove that all these are their daily life. They supply everything needed for their daily wants directly from the universal, including food, clothing and money. They have so far overcome death that many of them now living are over 500 years of age, as was conclusively proved by their records. There are comparatively few of these masters in India, other cults seeming to be but offshoots of their teaching. They realize their number is limited and that only a few scholars can come to them. In the invisible, however, they can reach almost unlimited numbers, and it seems to be the greater work of their lives to reach out into the invisible and help all who are receptive to their teaching. The teaching of Emil laid the foundation for the work which we were to take up years later in our third expedition to these countries, during which time we lived with the masters continuously for 3.5 years, traveled with them, and observed their daily lives and work throughout the Far East. Chapter 2. We arrived at Patal, from where the expedition was to start, late in the afternoon of December 22, 1894, and found we were to start Christmas morning upon what was to be the most memorable expedition of our whole lives. I never shall forget the few words Emil said to us that morning. These words were delivered in fluent English, although the speaker did not boast an English education, and he had never been out of the Far East. He began by saying, "'Tis Christmas morning. To you I suppose it is the day Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ, was born. To you the thought must come that he was sent to remit sins. To you he must typify the great mediator between you and your God. You seem to appeal to Jesus as a mediator between you and your God, who seems to be a stern and, at times, an angry God sitting off somewhere in the place called heaven, located where I do not know, except it be in man's consciousness. You seem to be able to reach God only through his less austere and more loving Son, the great and noble one whom we all call blessed and whose advent into the world this day commemorates. To us this day means more. To us this day not only means the advent into this world of Jesus, the Christ, but also this birth typifies the birth of Christ in every human consciousness. This Christmas Day means the birth of the great Master and Teacher, the great liberator of mankind from material bondage and limitations. To us this great soul came on earth to show more fully the way to the real God, the great omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient one, to show that God is all goodness, all wisdom, all truth, all in all. This great Master, who came to this world this day, was sent to show more fully that God not only dwells without us but within us, that he never is, nor can be, separated from us or any of his creations, that he is always a just and loving God, that he is all things, knows all and is all truth. Had I the understanding of all men, it is beyond my power to express to you, even in an humble way, what this holy birth means to us. We are fully convinced and we hope you also will see that this great Master and Teacher came to us that we might have a fuller understanding of life here on earth, that all mortal limitations are but man-made and in no other way should they be interpreted. We know that this greatest of all teachers came to show more fully that the Christ in him and through whom he did his mighty works is the same Christ that lives in you, in me, and in all mankind, that we can, by applying his teachings, do all the works that he did, and greater works. We believe that Jesus came to show more fully that God is the one great and only cause of all things, that God is all. You may have heard it said that we believe Jesus received his early training among us. Perhaps some of us do believe. Let that be as it is. Does it matter whether his training came from among us or as a direct revelation from God, the one source where all things really exist? For when an idea from God mind has been contacted by one man and sent out through the spoken word, cannot one, or all, again contact that thought in the universal? Because one has contacted the idea and sent it out, it does not follow that it is his particular possession. If he did appropriate and hold it, where would be room for receiving? To receive more we must give out what we have received. If we withhold what we receive, stagnation will follow and we will be like the wheel that generates power from the water and suddenly, of its own volition, begins to withhold the water which it is using. It will soon find itself stifled with inert water. It is only when the water is allowed to flow freely through that it is of value to the wheel to create power. Just so with man. When he contacts God's ideas he must give them out in order to receive the benefit from them. He must allow all to do the same, that they may grow and develop as he is growing. I am of the opinion that what Jesus taught came to him as a direct revelation from God, as it no doubt has come to our great teachers. Are not all things of God, and whatever one human being can do, cannot all do? We believe you will be convinced that God is ever willing and ready to reveal himself to all men as he has revealed himself to Jesus and others. The only requisite necessary is for each one to be willing to let God come forth. We believe, with all sincerity, that all are created equal, that all men are one man, that the mighty works done by Jesus can and will be done by all. You will see there is nothing mysterious about these works. The mystery is only in man's mortal concept of them. We fully realize you have come to us with minds more or less skeptical. We trust you will live with us and know us as we really are. Our work and the results accomplished. We leave you to accept or reject, as you will. Chapter 3. Emil sent us away with a few remarks, in which he said, "You are about to start on your expedition with these two men, Jast and Neprau, to accompany you. As you travel, it will take about 5 days to journey to your next important stopping place, about 90 miles distant. I will tarry here for a time because it will not be necessary for me to consume that time to cover the distance, but I will be there to greet you. I wish to ask that you leave one of your party here, in order to make observations and corroborate what may happen. In this way, time will be saved and he will be able to join the expedition not later than 10 days hence. We simply ask him to watch and report what he sees." We started with Jast and Neprau in charge of the expedition, and I wish to say that more business-like arrangements could not well be imagined. Every detail was complete and swung into line with the rhythm and precision of music. This harmony was maintained throughout the entire expedition, which lasted 3.5 years. We arrived at the appointed village about 4 o'clock of the 5th day, and there was Emil to greet us, as he had agreed. Can you imagine our amazement? We were quite certain we had come by the only traveled route and by the swiftest mode of locomotion in that country, except as the couriers go. They travel in relays and go night and day. Here was a man well advanced in years, as we thought, and one we felt would in no wise be able to negotiate a journey of 90 miles in less time than it required us to do the same, yet here he was. Of course we all tried to ask questions at once and were eager to hear. These were his words: "I said when you departed that I would be here to greet you. I am here. I wish to call your attention more fully to the fact that man in his right domain is limitless, knows no limit of time or space. Man, when he knows himself, is not obliged to toil wearily along for 5 days to accomplish 90 miles. Man in his right estate can accomplish any distance, it matters not the magnitude, instantly. A moment ago I was in the village from which you departed 5 days ago. What you saw as my body still reposes there. Your associate, whom you left in that village, will tell you that, until a few moments before 4 o'clock, I conversed with him, stating that I would go to greet you as you would arrive here about this hour. What you saw as my body is still there, and your associate still beholds it, although it is at present inactive. This was done simply to show you that we are able to leave our bodies and greet you at any appointed place, at any specified time. The two who accompanied you could have accomplished the journey as I have. In this way you will more readily realize that we are only ordinary humans of the same source as you. That there is no mystery, but that we have developed the powers given all by the Father, the great omnipotent one, more fully than you have. My body will remain where it is until night, then I will bring it here and your associate will proceed on his way here as you did, arriving in due time. After a day's rest we will journey to a small village, 1 day off, where we will tarry 1 night, then return here and meet your associate to see what his report will be. We will assemble this evening in the lodge. In the meantime, farewell." In the evening, after we had assembled, Emil, without opening the door, suddenly appeared in our midst and said, "You have seen me appear in this room, as you would say, by magic. Let me say there is no magic about it. Here is a simple experiment which you can behold. You can see this, consequently you will believe. Kindly gather around so that you can see. We have a small glass of water which one of your number has just brought from the spring. You see that a minute particle of ice is forming in the very center of the water. You see it gather to itself, particle by particle, more ice, until now the whole of the water in the glass is frozen. What has happened? I held the central atoms of the water and the universal until they became formed, or, in other words, I lowered their vibrations until they became ice, and all the other particles formed around them until the whole has become ice. You can apply this to the little glass, the tub, the pond, the lake, the sea, the whole mass of the water of the earth. What would happen? All would be frozen, would it not? To what purpose? None. You ask by what authority? I say by using a perfect law. But in this case, to what end? Nothing, as no good has been accomplished, or could be accomplished. Had I gone on determined to carry this out fully, what would have happened? The reaction. To whom? To me. I know the law, and what I express returns to me as truly as I express it. Therefore, I express only the good, and the good returns to me only as good. You can readily see that, had I persisted in the freezing, the cold would have reacted upon me long before I had accomplished the end, and I would, in reaping the harvest of my desire, have been frozen. Whereas, if I express the good, I reap the harvest of my good eternally. My appearance in this room tonight may be explained in this way. In the little room where you left me, I held my body in the universal by raising its vibrations, and it returned to the universal, or, as we say, returning it to the universal where all substance exists. Then, through my I am, my Christ consciousness, I held my body and my mind until its vibrations were lowered and it took form right here in this room, and you could see it. Wherein is there any mystery? Am I not using the power, or the law, given me by the Father through the beloved Son? Is not this Son you and I and all mankind? Wherein lies a mystery? There is none. Consider the faith represented by the mustard seed. It comes to us from the universal through the Christ within, which has already been born within us all. As a minute speck it enters through the Christ, or superconscious mind, the place of receptivity within ourselves. Then it must be carried to the mount, or highest within ourselves, the very top of the head. It is held there. We must then allow the Holy Spirit to descend. Now comes the admonition, thou shalt love the Lord, thy God, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind. Think. Does the meaning come? Heart, soul, strength, mind. Is there anything to do at this point but to turn it all over to God, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit in action? This Holy Spirit comes in many ways, perhaps as tiny entities tapping and seeking admittance. We must accept and allow this Holy Spirit to come in and unite with the minute point of light or seed of knowing, and revolve around it and adhere to it, just as you saw the particles of ice adhere to the central particle. And it will grow and form particle by particle, circle by circle, just as the ice. Multiply and express that seed of knowing until you are able to say to the mountain of difficulties, be thou removed and cast into the sea, and it will be done. Call this fourth dimension or what you wish, we call it God in expression, through the Christ in us. It is in this way that Christ was born. Mary, the Great Mother, perceived the ideal. The ideal was held in mind, then conceived in the soil of her soul, held for a time there, then brought forth or born as the perfect Christ child, the firstborn, the only begotten, the Son of God. He was nourished and protected, given the very best of the mother, watched over and cherished until he grew from childhood into manhood. It is thus the Christ comes to all of us. First as an ideal planted in the soil of our soul, the central part where God is, held in mind as the perfect ideal, then brought forth or born as the perfect child. The Christ consciousness you have seen what has been accomplished here doubt your own eyes. I do not blame you. I get the thought of hypnotism from the minds of some. My brothers, is there one here who feels that he does not have the power to exercise every God-given faculty that he has seen brought forth tonight? Do you think for a moment that I am in any way controlling your thought or vision? Do you think that I could, if I would, cast a hypnotic spell over any or all of you, for did you not all see? Is it not recorded in your own great book that Jesus entered a room with the doors closed? He just came in as I have done. Do you think for a moment that Jesus, the great master and teacher, needed in any way to hypnotize? He used his own God-given power as I have done tonight. Let me say that I have done nothing but what each one of you can do. Not only you, but every child that is or has been born into this world, or universe, has the same power to do just what you have seen accomplished this night. I wish to get this clearly before your minds. Let me also say that you are individuals, that you are not personalities, that you are free wills, not automatons. Jesus did not need to hypnotize and we do not need to hypnotize. Doubt us all you wish until you are fully satisfied as to our honesty. Put the idea of hypnotism away for the time, or at least let it lie passive until you have gone deeper into the work. All we ask is that you keep an open mind. Chapter 4. We entered the little village of about 200 inhabitants 1/2 hour before sunset, and, when it was known that Jast was with us, I believe every villager, old and young, and every pet and domestic animal came to greet us. While we were the object of more or less curiosity, it was immediately noted that Jast was the center of interest, greeted by all with the utmost reverence. After a few moments he said a word to the villagers, and all but a few returned to their usual duties. Jast turned to us and asked if we wished to go with him while the camp was being prepared for the night. 5 of our party said they were tired after the day's journey and wished to rest. The remainder of us followed Jast and the handful of villagers toward the far side of the clearing that surrounded the village. After crossing the clearing we had gone but a short distance into the jungle when we came upon the form of a man lying upon the ground as though dead. That was our impression at first glance. A second glance, however, showed that the repose suggested calm sleep rather than death. We stood staring as though transfixed, for we saw that the figure lying on the ground was Jast. Suddenly, as Jast walked toward it, the figure became animated and rose to a standing position. As the figure and Jast stood face to face for an instant, there was no mistaking the identity. It was Jast. All saw that it was he. Instantly, the Jast we had known had disappeared and there was but one figure standing before us. Of course, all this was accomplished in much less time than it takes to tell, and the wonder was that not one of us questioned. The 5 who had been left behind at camp came running without a signal from any of us. We afterwards asked them why they came. The answers were, "We don't know. The first we knew, we were all on our feet and running to you. We simply do not know why we did it. None of us recall any signal. We found ourselves running in your direction before any of us realized what we were doing," one of our number remarked. "My eyes are opened so wide that I see far beyond the veil of death, and the wonders that stand revealed are beyond conception." Another said, "I see the whole world overcoming death." How vividly the words come back, "The last enemy, death, shall be overcome." Is not this the fulfillment of these words? What pygmies are our mere intellects in comparison with this gigantic but simple understanding, and yet we have dared to look upon ourselves as giants of intellect. Why, we are mere babes. I just begin to see the meaning of, "Ye must be born again." How true the words. I leave the reader to imagine our surprise or bewilderment. Here was a man with whom we had been in daily contact, and by whom we had been served daily, that was able to lay his body down for the protection of others and go on and serve so very efficiently. Could it do otherwise than recall, "He that is greatest among you, shall be servant or shall serve"? I think there was not one among us but from that moment lost all fear of death. These people are accustomed to laying a body down before a village in the jungle of a country infested with marauding men and animals, and that village is as safe from the ravages of men and animals as though it were in a civilized country. It was very evident that Just's body had been lying where we found it for a considerable time. The hair had grown long and bushy, and in it were the nests of a little bird peculiar to the country. These birds had built their nests, reared their young, and the young had flown away, thus giving unmistakable evidence of the time the body had been in that position and inactive. These birds are very timid and will abandon their nests at the slightest disturbance. This shows the great love and trust of the little birds. Chapter 5. We were up at sunrise the next morning, and that day returned to the village where we had left our outfit. We arrived at the village just before dark and pitched our camp under a great banyan tree. The next morning Emil greeted us and we all began asking questions. He said, "I do not wonder at your questions and I will gladly answer all that I can at this time, leaving others until you have gone further into our work. In talking to you as I am, you fully realize that I am using your language to convey to you the one great underlying principle of our belief when all know the truth and it is rightly interpreted. Truly is it not one and all from the same source? Are we not all one with the universal mind substance, God? Are we not all one great family? Is not every child, everyone born, no matter the caste or creed, a member of this great family? You ask if we believe death is avoidable. Let me answer in the words of the Sita. The human body is built up from the individual cell, like the bodies of plants and animals, whom we love to call younger and less evolved brothers. The individual cell is a minute microscopic unit of the body. By a process of growth and division, repeated many times, this minute nucleus of a cell unit results at last in a complete human being, built up of almost countless millions of cells. These body cells specialize for certain different functions but they retain, in the main, the characteristics of the individual cell whence they arose. This individual cell may be looked upon as the torch-bearer of animate life. It passes on from generation to generation the latent fires of God, the vitality of all living beings, with an unbroken ancestry reaching back to the time when life first appeared on this planet. This individual cell has the property of unlimited youth. But what about the group cells called the body? The group cells arose from the individual cell repeated many times, retaining its individual characteristics, one of which is the latent fire of life, or eternal youth. The group cells, or body, function as guardian of the individual cell only during the short span of life as you know it now. The most ancient of our teachers by inspirational means perceived the truth of the fundamental unity of life reactions in plant and animal. We can well imagine these teachers beneath the spreading banyan addressing their pupils as follows: "Look at this giant tree. The vital process going on in our brother, this tree, and in ourselves is fundamentally the same. Behold the leaves and the buds at the tips of the oldest banyan, how young they are, young as the seed from which the giant sprang into life. The life reactions of plant and man being alike, man can certainly profit by the experience of the plant. As the leaves and buds at the tips of the branches of the oldest banyan are as young as the seed whence it sprang, even so the group cells in man forming his body need not gradually lose their vitality and die, but may grow young and evergreen as the ovum or individual cell itself. Indeed, there is no reason why your body should not grow as young and vital as the vital seed from which it sprang. The ever-spreading banyan, always a symbol of everlasting life, does not die except through accident. No natural law of decay, no old age process seems to exist within the banyan tree to affect injuriously the vital energy of its cells. The same is true of the human form divine. There is no natural law of death or decay for man, except through accident. No inevitable old age process exists within his body or group cells, nothing that can gradually paralyze the individual. Death is, then, an avoidable accident. Disease is, above all, disease, absence of ease or santi, sweet, joyous peace of the spirit reflected through the mind and the body. Senile decay, which is the common experience of man, is but an expression that covers his ignorance of cause, certain disease conditions of mind and body. Even accidents are preventable by appropriate mental attitude. Says the Siddha, the tone of the body may be so preserved that it may naturally resist with ease infectious and other disease, like plague and influenza. The Siddha may swallow germs and never develop disease at all. Remember that youth is God's seed of love planted in the human form divine. Indeed, youth is the divinity within man. Youth is the life spiritual, the life beautiful. It is only life that lives and loves, the one life eternal. Age is unspiritual, mortal, ugly, unreal. Fear thoughts, pain thoughts, and grief thoughts create the ugliness called old age. Joyous thoughts, love thoughts, and ideal thoughts create the beauty called youth. Age is but a shell within which lies the gem of reality, the jewel of youth. Practice acquiring the consciousness of childhood. Visualize the divine child within. Before falling asleep, suggest to your consciousness, I now realize that there is within me a spiritual joy body ever young, ever beautiful. I have beautiful, spiritual mind, eyes, nose, mouth, skin, the body of the divine infant, which now, tonight, is perfect. Repeat this affirmation and meditate upon it quietly while falling asleep. Upon rising in the morning, suggest to yourself aloud, well, dear, addressing yourself by name. There is a divine alchemist within. By the spiritual power of these affirmations during the night, a transmutation takes place and the unfolding from within, the spirit, has saturated this spiritual body and spiritual temple. The inner alchemist has caused dead and worn-out cells to fall and the gold of new skin to appear with perpetual health and loveliness. Truly divine love in demonstration is eternal youth. The divine alchemist is within my temple, constantly coining new and beautiful baby cells. The spirit of youth is within my temple, this human form divine, and all is well. Om Santi. 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 Peace. 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 Learn to smile in the sweet way of a child. A smile from the soul is spiritual relaxation. A real smile is a thing of true beauty, the artistic work of the inner ruler immortal. It is well to affirm, I think a kind thought for all the world. May all the world be happy and blessed. Affirm before taking up the work for the day, within me there is a perfect form, the form divine. I am now all that I desire to be. I visualize daily my beautiful being until I breathe it into expression. I am a divine child, all my needs are being now and forever supplied. Learn to thrill yourself. Affirm, infinite love fills my mind and thrills my body with its perfect life. Make everything bright and beautiful about you. Cultivate a spirit of humor. Enjoy the sunshine. You understand that I am quoting from the teaching of Siddha. They are the oldest teachers known and their teaching antedates all history by thousands of years. They went about teaching the people and showing them the better way of life even before man knew the simple arts of civilization. It is from their teaching that the system of rulers sprang. But these rulers soon wandered away from the realization that it was God expressing through them. Thinking it was themselves, the personal, who were doing the work, they lost sight of the spiritual and brought forth the personal or material, forgetting that all comes from the one source, God. These rulers' personal concepts gave rise to the great separations in belief and the wide diversity of thought. This is our concept of the Tower of Babel. The Siddha have preserved throughout the ages the true inspirational methods of God expressing through mankind and through all his creations. Realizing that God is all and that it is God manifesting through all. They have never deviated from this teaching. Thus they have preserved the great fundamental truth.